In this episode of Roach Reflections, I want to talk about hemp and tares as a roach bait. Hemp and tares have both been around for a very long time. Hemp seed came to the UK in 1914, right at the start of the First World War, when Belgian refugees brought hemp to fish with as they fled the German advance. They settled around Richmond-on-Thames and started to fish the Thames there for roach. And their favourite bait was hemp, and the roach quickly cottoned on to feeding on it, so much so that years later it became known as Hemp Seed Corner there, and you only had to wave your arm for the roach to boil in expectation of hemp landing on the surface of the river. Tares have been known about for a very long time. They're a sort of brown wild pea, and they're used by pigeon fanciers as feed for their pigeons. And they used to grow on the edge of cornfields. Tares are a little bit bigger than hemp, and both need some preparation before you can use them. I buy hemp in 20 kilo sacks, and I buy tares about 5 kilos at a time from one of the bait suppliers. At one time you could buy tares ready prepared in a big jar. That was very good. You could open up the jar, sort of a gallon jar, split it up into small bags and freeze it, and then just take a bag out when you wanted to fish. You can still buy tins of hemp, but it's just as easy to cook a big batch. I've got a big old saucepan. Don't use your wife's best saucepans or your own best saucepans. I've got massive saucepans that I've found pretty much. And I can cook about a gallon of hemp at a time, and I then bag it up into 1.5 pint bags. And bear in mind, if you put in say 6 pints of hemp, that makes about 9 or 10 pints when it's cooked. With hemp, I just soak it overnight, put it in the saucepan, leave it overnight, and then I simmer it the next day. Takes maybe 20 to 30 minutes. I watch it as I go. I've got a very old spoon. I spoon out some to have a look. You want so most of it split so the white shoot is showing. I don't use hemp on the hook, so I'm not bothered about whether it's overcooked. If you're going to use hemp on the hook, that does matter a lot, because you just want that split there. And the quality of the hemp seems to vary a lot nowadays. We seem to get a lot of cheap hemp for fishing, not good stuff. There is large hemp or giant hemp for fishing on the hook. I'm not sure it's that great. It takes a lot of cooking. I'd rather use a small tare, to be honest with you. With tares, it's a bit different. The best way I've found to cook it is to just put in a cupful in an old flask and put boiling water in there. Don't overfill it with water. Maybe 3/4 full of boiling water, and then just leave it overnight, and it will cook very, very slowly. If you try to boil up tares, first of all, even if you soak them overnight, it will seemingly take forever. And then suddenly they trigger from uncooked and useless to overcooked and a sort of, I call it tare soup, just a mess of soggy tares that are useless. Whereas this slow method with the flask, it doesn't seem to overcook them, and they're usually pretty much all right. And again, I just split it up into tiny batches. I only take an egg cupful of tares at a time fishing, and I just feed hemp. So I take a pint to 1.5 pints of hemp to feed. Any stuff I don't use goes back in the freezer. Try and use that particular load the next time I go fishing. Hemp and tares are very much roach baits, which is why this series is called Roach Reflections. Roach do love hemp and tares. They don't work all the year round as far as I'm concerned. There are people who catch on hemp and tares, especially on hemp in the fens on some of these waters where the roach cram into small waters, like the Welland in Spalding, places like that where there's a very high concentration of fairly small roach really. and they can catch on hemp fishing right through the winter. On the Stour, which is my main river, Dorset Stour, Hemp and Tares works from the start of the season till sometime in October, very occasionally November, very occasionally it's no good after the end of September. It's a slow starting bait. Start of the season, 16th of June, you can catch on tares, but the roach don't really start to switch on, and I think it's due to a change in diet after spawning. They probably feed a lot on weed in May and into June, and then they seem to switch on to snails in late June and into July, and they eat more insects as well. So start of the season you will catch on tares. By July it's starting to work well. By mid-July and into August it should work very well indeed. If you have a lot of cold rain in midsummer, that can knock it on the head. Not so good then, but still worth persevering with it most of the time in the summer. And I like it as a bait. It's a cheap bait. You don't need to spend £20 on casters or anything like that. It's a clean bait. Your hands don't stink of the ammonia of maggots. There's no mess with it. You can just, I find I just feed a little bit of hemp every cast, 10, 15, 20 grains a cast, which is why that pint and a half will easily last a session. I don't bother feeding tares. I just fish one on the hook, and that's good. There are times when the fish won't take the tares on the hook. They want to have hemp instead. And on those days, if you think the fish are there but they're not really feeding, then it's a case of going down a couple of hook sizes and fishing the hemp and seeing how you get on. There have been days when I haven't caught on the tares and had £20 a roach on hemp. So while I prefer tares, I always have an open mind. There's 2 ways to hook hemp, maybe 3. Some people can drill a little hole in this little flat spot on a hemp seed and push the hook through there. I've yet to succeed doing that. I don't know what their knack is. The main way is to push that hook into the split in the hemp seed, and this is why the hemp's got to be cooked just right for that. My way, which is not to bother with hemp on the hook, I've just got the tares, and if the tares are cooked correctly, they're just like a haricot bean, not too hard, not too soft. They just hook easily, just nick them on, and away you go. And the hooks vary a bit. The hooks for hemp, you're really looking at about a size 20, maybe a small 18, very fine wire, tied to probably 0.08. For tares, I'm using the Drennan barbless silverfish hooks in a 16. That's about right. Sometimes a 14 I would try with a bigger tare, and even a maple pea, which cook pretty much the same way as tares. They're much bigger though. You need to be getting really clonking great roach to fish maple peas. I said about them attractive to roach. One of the things is you get far less of the nuisance fish. On the Stour, I tend to get quite a lot of dace on the lower parts of the Stour on tares some days. And so on those days, I often catch more dace than roach, and they are a bit of a pain, to be honest. Dace are very good at chewing half the tare off the hook. You miss a fast bite and back comes half a tare, which you throw away and put a new tare on, and try not to tear your hair out. On the better days, the dace aren't there. You're just catching roach. Nice, slow, solid bites. I tend to fish quite sensitively with hemp and tares. I don't use a big heavy float, just little stick floats, wagglers, light shotting down the line. The so-called shot bites that people talk about on hemp and tares, I've never had it happen. I don't quite see what the problem is. I tend to fish with very small shot when I'm fishing hemp and tares, number 8s and 10s down the line, even with a stick float. But the roach seem to be able to distinguish between a hemp seed or a tare and a shot, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Maybe in the days of lead shot, which looked, a sort of size #1 lead shot looked far more like a grain of hemp, this was a problem, but the tin shot don't seem to trouble them. I've had other fish on hemp and tares over the years, dace of course. It's not uncommon to catch chub on hemp and tares. I can't think of any really massive chub on hemp and tares. I've had 4-pounders. I've had a few good bream. They're not great fans of it, but I've had a few up to nearly £5. Quite a few silver bream, which is unusual, but there you are. They seem to like hemp and tares. Very occasionally a gudgeon or a bleak or a minnow even, but again, you're not getting bothered by the bleak. One session last summer I fished on the lower Stour just above Throop, and I tried casters at first, and I was catching lots of bleak, the odd dace and odd roach, and I switched to tares, and that was it. Didn't see the bleak at all after that. Few of the tiny roach or tiny dace, and just much better quality roach, which is what it's all about for me. I'm not trying to catch a big weight of roach, just some decent fish that put a bend in the rod, and hopefully one worth weighing. You definitely need confidence in hemp and tares to fish with them, so if you've never fished with them before, take your time about preparing to fish with them. Make sure you've got the right hooks. Don't go out there with some great big thick wire crude hooks tied to thick line. Get those fine wire hooks, the finer the better. Things like Camison B511s, the Drennan barbless silverfish hooks I've mentioned, in a 20 for the hemp, 16 for the tares. There are other fine wire hooks, but something really fine. Barbless is fine to use with them. And if possible, just take hemp and tares fishing with you. Pick a swim where you know there's roach, somewhere not too deep ideally, maybe 5 or 6 foot deep, over some weed or lilies where there are roach there, including some decent ones, and just patiently feed it and fish it. My early excursions with hemp and tares were very mixed fortunes. The first time I ever fished tares was an open match on Medley in 1975. I drew next to Chris Love, a top London match angler of the time. We were fishing to size limits. I'd never fished hemp and tares before in my life. I fished them for a while and I caught a nice roach, about 10 ounces, which actually counted. And then I sort of lost faith and fished maggots and caught lots and lots of tiny roach and dace that didn't count because they're all under the size limit. He was persevering with hemp and caster, fishing casters well across the river, and ended up weighing in about 2.5 pounds, which was no good, though he probably put back about 7 or 8 pounds of undersized roach. But with the knowledge and experience I've got now with tares, I'd have stuck with it for 5 hours and probably done all right, caught some good roach. But I just didn't have a clue really. I didn't have the confidence to build the swim and know what I was doing. But after that I got better. My first goes with hemp probably 3 or 4 years later. I had lots and lots of bites and not many fish. I can remember one day getting 300 bites and 28 roach. Practically hairless. That was with a fiberglass rod, and that was fishing hemp on the hook. But it did get better, and I started to get big bags of roach, 20-pound bags of good roach on tares. And around about a decade ago, when I wrote my big roach book, my first one, I almost stumbled across some fishing with hemp and tares on Throop. Fished one day feeding hemp and fishing corn, catching not a lot. Eventually noticed the fish boiling on the top for the hemp. Switched to a waggler 3 foot deep in 10 foot of water and started to catch net roach. It was almost the end of the session and a bit too late, and I went back subsequently over the following month and caught a lot of roach. And I played around with different floats, fishing up in the water 3 foot deep with little canal crystals and light shotting, sometimes fishing hemp, sometimes fishing tares, and in the end I was rewarded with a 2.5 pound roach. So the perseverance paid off, and I learnt a huge amount in the meantime. And since then I've fished hemp and tares a huge amount. So it's a bait that comes highly recommended. It's got a long history. As I say, the hemp seed fishing goes back over 100 years, and you didn't really hear about tare fishing until the late 60s, early 70s. A guy called Mac Willis from Newark fished it on the Trent and elsewhere, did very well with it. He had amazing confidence with tares. I hope I've got you thinking in this one. I'm certainly hopeful of doing some more hemp and tare fishing come next summer, 2021. Please click like and subscribe as I build the channel, and it's cheerio from me.